Game nights in my house are special times. They're days that are circled on a calendar and filled with family and friends to come play card or board games. While I do admit there is a small trophy that goes to the winner for one of our favorite games, a trophy that I have come close to winning, but never winning it. But it's not about the trophies or even the specific game that we play. It's about the fun of competition. This past game day, we stuffed our house with pizza, with people, and played games for many hours. While, yeah, there was a good amount of yelling and backstabbing, just not for me, definitely not for me. But I could sum up the day as our group lost to the fascist party in Secret Hitler. We went nuts for donuts. And then we navigated the dungeons in Munchkins. But those weren't the highlights. Those were not the highlights. It was Trial by Trolley. Trial by Trolley is described as a party game with moral dilemmas and trolley murders. This game, which is about a year old, is not a new concept, since it has been pondered in the halls of many academic buildings for decades. Let me explain what it is. The trolley problem is a series of thought experiments in ethics and psychology involving a stylized ethical dilemmas of whether to sacrifice one person to save a large number. The series usually begins with a scenario of a runaway trolley is on the course to collide with and kill a certain number of people, let's say 5, down the track. But the driver or any person can intervene and divert the track to kill just one person on a different track. And yes, there's other variations with moral, legal, and life and death situations that are posed to make the situations more difficult. So, should you save the one person who was initially safe, or kill the large group of people? This situation, in this ethical dilemma, got more notice and more popularity thanks to the creative minds on the show The Good Place, as the trolley problem was the basis of one of their episodes. In other words, should Chidi save the innocent schoolgirl or the 5 elderly nuns? What would you do? As I was reminded on our game day by my friends who made these ethical choices as difficult for me as possible. And there was never a black and white, this is right, this is wrong one. It's what each one you go back and forth. And the difficulty of moral and ethical issues is that something that has plagued, each of us and every society since there has been a society. Should we put the needs of our needs first and others second? Should the greater good of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one? The common gray area of life has left many a philosopher, theologian, and thinker spending much of their life pondering actions. While the world has spent centuries debating these shades of gray dilemmas, Christianity has kind of a cheat code. Something that has been available to them for around 2,000 years, the Bible. Jesus lived and taught everyone that we should humble ourselves and put the needs of others before ourselves. We can see this in the life that he lived, the teachings that he taught us, the parables that he told us, and most importantly, his actions on the cross. We each, as believers in God, should have a strong desire to help other people. To most importantly, share the good news of Jesus' death and resurrection over sin. Help them understand that they are loved by God who has made them and can be forgiven. If this basic truth of the faith is obvious to the people in the church, then why are we not doing it? Why do we have the lack of desire to help people? Putting it directly. Why does our desire to be the light to the dark and sinful world grow dimmer when the people that we should be in position to help are people we really don't enjoy being around or care for? Well, this is the situation that one of our main characters is in our study of the book of Esther in the series Perfect Timing. Today we're finishing chapter 2 of the book of Esther, looking towards the main idea. The one concept that we want to learn from is do unto others even if they're politicians. Do unto others even if they're politicians. But before we jump into the deep end of the pool, let's slowly wade ourselves through and figure out who this third main character of the story is, Mordecai. Mordecai is a Jewish man from the tribe of Benjamin. His father's name was Kish. He was a second-generation Jew, as they were born in captivity and most likely not from the homeland. He was a liberated Babylonian captive living in Susa, the capital of Persia. Most of the Jews in Babylon had been assigned foreign names that they were required to use. So we don't know Mordecai's Hebrew name, but his foreign name means servant of Marduk. Mordecai was definitely not a servant of Marduk or Bel by other names. He was given that name ironically because he was such an obvious and loyal devotee to Yahweh, to God. Why Mordecai and Esther, along with others, did not return to Israel, I don't know. While sometimes it's easy to see Mordecai, the father figure for Esther, as an older, wiser, more responsible protector of Esther, it was more likely he wasn't that much older than her. This little audio flashcard should have brought up some of what we have talked about in the last few episodes of our man Mordecai, pushing what's in the back of the brain towards the front. But now that we have this information about M, let's open our Bibles to Esther chapter 2, verse 19 and 20 to help understand our main idea, do unto others, even to politicians. 19 says, Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. Okay, there's a few important questions from these two verses. The primary one that we need to start off right away with is, why do we have these verses? Well, there's a lot of possibilities, and the main one, the one that I think makes the most sense is this last section, these last few verses of chapter 2 are what's called a literary flashback to help the reader understand and transition to a new character in the story. It's kind of like the same idea when an episode of a television show that you enjoy starts a show with a previous episode scene. It's a good way to catch the viewer up on what has happened with the character and how it will be continued by what you're about to see. Like, for instance, when I turn on an episode of My Hero Academia, and when I start seeing episodes of the character Froppy from 5 episodes ago, I'm like, I saw that. Wonder why they're doing that again. It's because this new episode, Froppy, the frog hero, it's going to be about her. This is very similar. This flashback about Mordecai catches us up quickly because we knew about Esther becoming queen. We knew about Mordecai. We knew about the virgins. We know about Mordecai and how she obeyed all that. But outside of this being a narrative flashback, the two other questions that come to mind for me from these verses are, what is a second gathering of virgins? And what's the king's gate? So let's talk about this gathering first. Why did Xerxes need more virgins if he just made Esther his queen? Did the king really need a second round of the most beautiful teenage girls to come before him if he already had the most beautiful and most bold in Esther? Perhaps the king had grown used to having a bountiful, endless supply of beauties at his command and felt the need to have a second harem. Or maybe this was just the rest of the candidates who were to become queen that were scheduled to come see Xerxes after Esther and never got a chance, so they just become the second gathering of virgins. Either way, it's really gross. But these transitional verses show us that Esther, who is described as queen in these verses, chooses to spend time with the virgin concubines, the girls her age, instead of the high court officials and the things that come with being queen. Now, this is something that would not make any sense if you just took out everything and just left it as the queen hung out with the concubines. No. But if you think it as Esther, a teenage girl, it makes a lot more sense because all these girls were about the same age and probably had a similar background and interests. And maybe they could be Esther and these other girls could be themselves around each other instead of being this formal Queen Esther. But then there's this second part. It says that Mordecai sat by the king's gate in chapter 2, verse 19. So, this is a classic Bible times and culture indicator that went right over my head. Whenever I read about the king's gate, and there's a lot of these references, when you look at Daniel, Boaz, remember Samson? He picked up the gate of a city. Then let's not forget David's terrible son, Absalom. These are all references to the king's gate. And whenever I used to read them, I would just think like, oh yeah, some big archway and go into the city. It's like where the main entryway is. No, see, that's where I was wrong. Excavations at Susa have identified a monumental gatehouse about 100 yards east of the main passage. This passageway through the city was about 50 feet long. It had 4 towers graced outside the structures and 4 pillars about 40 feet high, decorating the 12,000 square foot chamber through which the passageway entered the palace complex. In fact, this Susa gatehouse, it had an inscription ordered by Xerxes at the gate identifying that it was built by his dad, Darius. So these types of gates were common in the Middle East in this time period. They were important places for city officials to conduct themselves. In a lot of places, law cases, official matters were handled in this building. And so if Mordecai is sitting and hanging around here, sitting by the gate day by day, it's an indication that he was part of the city's middle management. So we could assume then he either had worked his way up over time into this position from exile to privilege, or he was appointed there by Esther. Now, yeah, this could have been a big thank you to Mordecai for helping her. Or he could have had this post for years and, like I said, climbed up the governmental ladder. Personally, I like to think that he did this on his own, but due to the timeline of the story and the finding out of the plot for these 2 evil eunuchs, it could go either way. But it has no indication of the story either way, so it really doesn't matter. You can pick up your own backstory on this because it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect Mordecai or Esther in any way. But for Mordecai, if he as the city official, he doesn't really have to care about many things that aren't under his jurisdiction, that aren't on his desk, in his job description. But he goes out of his way to keep in contact with Esther, as verse 20 shows us. Reminding her to keep their big secret. Remember, Esther did that. He kept the secret for Esther. Esther kept it for him, that they were Jewish. This is the first example of the golden rule that we see in this passage. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty darn easy for Mordecai to show love and compassion to Esther. They're family. It still shows us a good example of what we need to do. That how we need to take time to show love for other people. No matter if it's our family, our neighbor, or even politicians. Look with me in chapter 2, verses 21, 22, and 23. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting behind the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai. He told it to Queen Esther. Esther told it to the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated to be found so, the men were both hanged by the gallows, and it was recorded into the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Never trust a eunuch, I think, is the summary of those verses. But let's remind ourselves that the kingdom was stocked with these unreproductive men so that the King Xerxes could trust them. So in other words, that they won't sire any offspring and somehow make an awkward grasp for the throne. Irony. These men who the king assumed he could trust due to their lack of testosterone still were not trustworthy because, well, they just didn't like the king. Since, like I said, a lot of theologians take these two verses and spread them out over a good time, some even up to 4 years. It gave Mordecai plenty of time to see these two of the king's eunuchs grow into the state of discontentment. Bigtha and Teresh. Okay, let's just stop that. Biggie and Terry. Now remember, this is not Biggie Smalls. No, this is Biggie No Balls. These two men are not major characters to this story. No, they're just minor characters that pop up here and there and move the story along. After all, that's kind of how life works. We're not all main characters. Not everyone can be Beauty or the Beast. Some of us are just the wardrobe, the talking stove, Chip. And Terry is not somebody we have met yet, but Biggie we have. Chapter 1, verse 10. It says, on the 7th day, when the king was feeling good from the wine, Ahasuerus commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagatha, Zethar, Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who personally served him. He was one of the king's eunuchs who got sent to bring Vashti in to them in her crown and all that drunken nonsense that happened after that. This man was a trusted guard and servant of the king, but over time he grew angry and made arrangements to have him killed. Do we know what the straw was that broke these two men's back and had started their plot to kill the king? I wish I could tell you, but I don't know, because honestly, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't impede or unhinge or help the story at all. We could go through the record for the many attempted murders that have been in just America's history. Look at the reasons for why these attempted murderers tried to do this evil thing, and usually the reasons are very silly or insignificant. And just so we know and remind ourselves that this anger that these two had for the king in his heart was murder, even though they didn't actually murder the king. Because Jesus did tell us that holding anger in our heart is the same as murder in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew reads, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder. And whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says, "You fool," will be subject to hellfire. So if we were to look at our own self, we murder people in our heart all the time for stupid, insignificant reasons. For instance, the other day I was traveling to church, going right up north on 83. They're in Elmhurst, they're doing work on the right lane, so traffic is all merging left from 3 lanes to 2. And I waited like everyone else, merging, inching up until traffic breaks open again and lanes reopen to 3. But I notice in my mirror that there are cars that are flying down this soon-to-be closed right lane, going all the way up to the merge sign. And when I looked, all of them were getting in ahead. This angered me greatly, because those cars couldn't wait the extra 2 minutes that I did. Angered me in my heart. And you know what Jesus said is murder. Was that a good reason? No. Stupid, silly, insignificant. Just like probably with Biggie and Terry. Their plot and murder attempt was all thanks to was stopped all thanks to the observations and listening skills of Mordecai. But Mordecai, this good Jewish man, had a choice. Share the news with the trusted people up the ladder, save the king, or not. What would you do? Should we risk a lot, like Mordecai was, to save Xerxes, a pagan, sinful, disgusting sex freak, the dredges of society, the slime that comes with politicians? Yes, each and every time. While we all have people in our lives we do not care for, people that rub us the wrong way, the people that live in the middle ground, the slime of morality, this doesn't mean that we are to show them love, kindness, or God. We're supposed to show them that. The same kind of forgiveness, grace, and love that God showed us when we were like them to God. Mordecai is the example to us of treating others how we should. Plus, making sure it is done right too. I say that because the temptation for Mordecai is that he could have heard about this assassination plot and then made the weakest efforts to tell somebody up the ladder to stop it. It'd be like us whispering of something very important to the person across the room and them not hearing it and say, "What'd you say?" "Oh, nothing, never mind, don't worry about it." And then going in our mind, "Well, I tried to warn them." No, that's not really trying. Instead, Mordecai goes the distance in reporting this an attack on the king in verse 22. It says, "And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. Esther told it to the king in the name of Mordecai. And when the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles of the presence of the king." So it's most likely that conspiracies against government officials was often, just like it is today. But Mordecai told Esther, who then informed the king, because Esther is the perfect person to relay this news to the king. She was of somebody he trusted greatly and could convince him. And she reported this in the name of Mordecai, so she didn't forget to give Mordecai credit for discovering the plot. We must give Mordecai credit for keeping alert, maintaining contact with the queen, because this alertness and communication, as we'll find out soon, made a difference that affected history. A way to see this from a modern perspective would be that Mordecai had a tip for the FBI that the president was going to be shot. Mordecai then gave it to somebody at the bureau, And that person made sure Mordecai's name and contact were associated with it, and then handed it over to internal affairs for them to check out this agent who is plotting this assassination attempt. After this detailed check into these two eunuchs, Biggie and Terry, and found that they were planning to be true for one and solid, their death was quickly sentenced of hanging. The gallows, as it's mentioned in verse 23, is not like the gallows that come to mind when we think of Western films, or even the king hangman. Think of it more as shish kebabs. The Hebrew indicate that these men were impaled, not crucified, not hung with a rope. Impalement was a common practice in the Near East and was not necessarily how perpetrators were killed, because they were usually killed beforehand. The impalement then was driving a long stake through their body so that they could be hung in the air on display for all to see. That was super gross to learn about, but history is history. And it's for Xerxes, his dad was a legend at this type of shish kebabbing his enemies, because he was known to have killed and then impaled 3,000 men. A record of this assassination attempt was written in the official court records. And at the end of the day, the king was safe. A detailed record was recorded about it, and the country kept going on like normal. All thanks to the ethical decision made by a kind-hearted Jewish man. This example of morality from Mordecai is something that we need to be reminded of in our lives more often. We need to be God in love, an example of love, kindness, grace, forgiveness to every person we come in contact with. From the people we see in minor moments like driving to the people we see all the time, like family and coworkers. And it shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to anyway. Jesus never taught us that the golden rule, do unto others, is a tiered structure. As in, do unto others only if they're cool. We agree with them. We can use them. We don't have another choice. Definitely don't treat them as God would treat them if they're Republicans, if they're liberals, if they're gay, if they're questioning, if they're black, if they're whatever. No, that's not what Jesus said. Instead, we're supposed to love all of them, just as we have been loved by a God. Because that's what God did for us when he sent the Lord Jesus to die in our place and take our punishment. He died for all of us, not just the ones he's cool with. Even us screw-ups. See you next time.